everybody. It's Raina from Garden District Bookshop, and we are at Garden District Bookshop tonight, broadcasting live from the bookstore. And I am really excited to welcome Kelly Harris-DeBerry with me here tonight. She is a poet, and honestly, I'm reading through her bio. I couldn't even tell you all of the amazing things she's been a part of. So many literary agencies and poetry events. At the end of her bio, it says, Kelly is a cultural leader with business savvy, and I love that. And from everything that I have read and my brief talking to her, I would say that is spot on. So I'm just going to click this button and invite Kelly into the room with me. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. How are you tonight?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Cool. It's perfect.
Happy Friday to you. Happy National Poetry Month to you.
Yes, National Poetry Month is, I feel like there's so much other stuff going on, and I'm really excited to have you and a couple other poets for Virtual Happy Hour in April, so that we can kind of be in that Poetry Month celebration and not let it get like lost in the chaos that's happening in the world. For sure.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. I'm so excited because I first watched the video of your poem 45 Coats, like, I don't know, a year or more ago. And it was amazing. And it struck home for me in a lot of ways. And I have a son, he's 14. So when, it starts with your daughter saying, like, I don't have the quote right in front of me, right? But when it gets cold, she'll need up to like 45 coats. And I'm like, okay. And then you just took that and you ran with all these things that can come at you in life. And not only, you approach that from yourself, but then if you have kids or you're around kids and you know that you are writing it in that way, I was like, tears.
Yeah. People often will ask me about writing and writing process. And I say that becoming a mother was the best writing workshop, because I was able to see language begin from the beginning, and to see my daughter go from, just looking at me to a line to to the phonetical stages that a child goes through, to now talking about everything from violin notes to politics to wanting to, protest, is really a testament to how we experience language. And so often what I'm trying to do in my work is not only write, but provide an experience of doing language, as Toni Morrison often or talked about in one of her essays, I believe, or lectures. So it's important for me to do language. And so my work ranges in that way, from sound, experimental things. There's a poem in the book that is for Serena Williams that is in the shape of a racetrack. So there's all sorts of things that I'm playing with, but I'm trying to get at language in various ways, whether it be sound, whether it be the visuals, whether it be a short film, as you saw, a short video. I'm trying to do language in multiple ways.
You're doing it. I mean, you're not just trying, you are doing it. And anytime I've heard you read your poetry or perform your poetry or your videos, you see that. And once you have seen your videos or heard you perform your poetry, then when you're reading them, I hear your voice. I hear that cadence, and
thank you.
That's beautiful.
I should say, in the attempt to do poetry, I wanted to do this book in a way that allowed the reader what I call an enhanced experience so when you scan the back of the book, you get, it takes you to an audio playlist. And so you can hear me actually reading some of the poems, which has been really cool. And I've gotten some amazing responses to that. One guy told me he played it on his phone, and while he was cutting the grass, he was listening to the audio portions of the book. So another person, was talking about their child was staying up late at night. They couldn't get the baby to sleep, and so they would listen that way. So providing multiple ramps onto my poetry is equally important to me.
Making it really accessible to all ages and all abilities. And hey, you need something to listen to while mowing the lawn. That's not something I would have picked first as poetry, like I would have thought of.
Yeah.
But why not?
And of course, I didn't think of it either. And so, oftentimes people are asking me, what do I want? What was I trying to do with this book? And what's your keys to success? You get those questions in Q&A sometimes, but for me, I don't know if I'm a success. That's up to the reader, to the audience to determine that. My job is just to do and to create, and how it is experienced in the world is really limitless. And so that excites me, to be able to have my poetry just live in the world in various ways. And for me, coming from an MFA program and learning the structured way of writing, I kind of work against that when I can, as much as I can actually, to not only connect with multiple audiences, but also to show that poetry can be accessible. Growing through my MFA program, there were often times my mom would come to support me, and there would be readings, and I felt so bad for my mom because she sat through many readings that she just was not connected to. And I made a vow to myself that I would never try to be a poet that a janitor couldn't find himself in, or someone cooking in the kitchen, or just the range of life. And I often think that sometimes writers are reading to writers too often and not enough to people in the world. And I talked about that. I think I tweeted about that recently. I was at Melba's Po Boys, and all of the people there didn't care if I had an MFA, didn't care what my bio was. They didn't care about anything. They wanted to know, like, what do you write about? Is there something in this for me? And so that's important. And I think once we take those literary walls down a little bit, the poetry belongs to the people. And so I hope to try to be the people's poet as much as I can.
Poetry is, it has this, I'm going to say, stigma sometimes of it being sort of, I don't know, hoity-toity. That's a very official word, but it does. Yeah. And people think that they can't understand that every time you read a poem, you must be looking for this deep, deep meaning and philosophy and stuff. And that's like, if a poem speaks to you, like if you read it and you feel it, it doesn't, those words can be incredibly simple. It doesn't you don't have to always be looking for some sort of deeper meaning, and getting over that stigma. I think as a bookseller too, that's one of the things that I try. So I've been in the bookstore, and a teenager will be looking at poetry, and their parents will be like, "Oh, you don't want that." And I'm thinking, why did you just say that? Like, why did you just say that? And like, how do I covertly get back in there and go, no, you can totally read this, and this is great. Like, here, let me throw some at you. I've got some on the shelf behind me. Take these. You'll probably like them. Making it, just getting over that idea that poetry is difficult, or poetry you have to always be picking it apart. Just read it and love it.
I think it's a good time for poetry right now. I often say that, one writer's success often can soften the ground for other writers to come. And so I think with the Amanda Gorman, I think with, other successes that we're seeing a shift in publishing a little bit, with seeing more diverse writers. And I just think that, it's all good for, many of us to have those opportunities. Yeah.
Absolutely. And there have been some young adult books that have come out in the last few years that are written in this poetic, this verse form.
Yeah.
And they're full novels. When you read them, I mean, you're getting a whole story just like it's a novel, but those are much more accessible to people too. If I come across a kid or an adult who's like, oh, I'm not a big reader, let's go, okay, let me show you this. Because not only is this, I mean, it's full length. Look at how thick it is. You're going to read it. You're going to enjoy it. It's a novel. And now this is a gateway. I can go both ways. I can go to poetry or I can go to novels, like in both directions. And that, I think, has made a difference in the poetry world as well. There, publishers have seen that these books are selling and they're poetry.
Yeah.
So we can make more poetry books too.
Yeah. I think most people know, and particularly in the industry, in the publishing industry, that, we kind of joke, poets and I often joke that poetry is like the stepchild of all the other genres, so we do have a more difficult time, I think, in selling, However, I think there's a quote somewhere that says poets are the unnamed legislators of the world. When you're at a protest or something like that, you go get a poet. Poets are often the ones on the ground doing multiple works, both in print and in body, and pushing the public, pushing, issues to the forefront in our communities and our society. So poets play a very vital role in shaping who we are, and
absolutely. Poets are great they're passionate and taking that passion and getting it out into the world in a way that we can understand, but is also beautiful in like 4 sentences. And you're like, oh my gosh, that just happened and I'm ready to go. I'm here for sure. So we do have a question from Linda, who's watching in Florida. How old were you when you first started writing period and writing poetry? We'll have that 2 questions. I'll split it up.
So I think my first poem, I know the title of my first poem. I was at my grandmother's house. She had the plastic on the couch. I wrote the poem in a 5-ring notebook on her coffee table, and it was called "Be a Leader, Not a Follower." I don't know why I wrote that poem. I think I might have been in 6th grade. And so I showed it to my dad, and he said, "You wrote a poem." And at that time, I didn't really know what a poem was. I'm not that old, but at that particular time, we didn't have all the youth literary programs that are available to young people now. And so he was like, you should keep that. You should keep doing that. And so that's really where it started. I always had a love for writing. Some of it started, I think there's a 2-pronged thing that I would say. Growing up in a Black church, we always had Easter speeches. And so early on, that was my training for being in front of the public. So we would have these scraps of Easter speeches, a speech or a poem that you would have to memorize and recite in front of the church. So I would get these little scraps of poems all the time from, 2 years old. And so I had a love for language at that particular time. And then I started journaling as a kid and just writing things down. And I remember one of the first things I wanted for Christmas that was like a big thing for me was a desk. I think I wanted a desk at like 7 years old. I just wanted a desk in my room to write on, Friends, my mom, and they were just shocked that I wanted a desk. But I got a white desk in this chair. And I remember thinking how official I was, not really knowing what a writer was, but I felt that this was something I had to have. And so I think those were sometimes I think the universe chooses who and what we're going to be. And so I think I was chosen to do this work, although I didn't know that the process was happening at that particular time. And then fast forward, I was in high school and another student was supposed to introduce a guest speaker. We had these assemblies and that person got sick or something. So they asked me to fill in for the other student and I introduced a poet. And I was just so amazed by this poet. His name was Mutabu Okanta. He was doing sound and music and all of these things. And that was my first time seeing someone do poetry. Like, oh, that's somebody that's a poet, you know. But I was always reading. I love the library. I didn't have my own personal library like I have right now behind me. This is mostly poetry for the most part behind me. But because my parents really couldn't afford to invest in books that way, but I always was going to the library. So those combination of things helped me to be the poet that I am today. So, and I am still becoming a poet. I am not there yet. I don't believe that I've arrived. I think I can get better. I think that I'm trying every day to be a decent poet, but more importantly, a human being that makes some kind of contribution to my people, to my community.
Absolutely. Do you think there's, I don't know if there's a point that anyone ever really becomes, if you're a creative type, do you ever really become whatever that thing is? Because as a creative person, I'm always striving for better or different, maybe is even the word, because creatively, like, when you reach a point and you just sit there, you're like, well, okay, well, I'm just painting the same thing. I'm just writing the same thing. So it's not as creative anymore, unless you continue to mold and change and grow. So
innovation is big for me. And it's just a challenge for me. I look at what everybody's doing. I think you should look at your peers and what people are writing, what people are reading, what people are doing. Those things are important to me. I really feel like an active part of your literary community, but I'm not in like a competition mode when I'm looking at others. I'm always asking myself, what else can I do? Right. So yes, I'm going to do a book, but I got to do, a playlist with it, or I'm going to do, so my next job is what else can I do that is challenging? How can I, I'm going back to the Serena poem, that poem for the audio. And the story about that poem is that Serena had won Sports Person of the Year, and there was this whole argument and controversy about American Pharoah, the horse, that the horse should have been selected as Sports Person of the Year. And I thought, wow, pitting a woman against a horse, pitting a Black woman against a horse with all the historical background. But I thought, I don't want to just write this poem as a rant of some sort. And so I studied race horse announcers for about 3 months to try to understand their cadence and their talking. And so the audio of that poem is done in the voice of a race horse announcer. And I don't know if it works or not, but I'm just trying to push myself to see, can that be done? Can I do it? And to be really fearless, both in voice and on page. And that I believe that my voice is also an instrument. So I'm trying to play this instrument of voice on page and in person. So I don't know if I'm succeed at that all the time, but it's important to me to try and to not be a cookie cutter artist.
That's absolutely fascinating that you actually sat and studied horse race announcers. I'm sure I've heard one, probably like on the news or something, like when they're doing clips. I don't know that I've ever watched a horse race from beginning to end in reality, but like just to sit and Google through that and listen to that as part of your inspiration, I never would have really guessed that.
Yeah.
You did a great job now that I'm thinking about, like, now that you've mentioned that. But yeah, that poem actually does it. Like, it makes you think about it. It's not just like I can't believe this happened, like a social media rant, like it's not like that, which you have every right to do that. And as you're saying, that's sort of where it came from, this idea that like, oh my gosh, how could this happen? And this, being sort of like upset and then inspired by it.
But also racing race. I feel like we're always in this race against race. And I wanted to try to mimic that as well. So I'm trying to, do these things that, are wacky and crazy on the page sometimes, but it sharpens me as a writer, as a poet. And I try to have fun on the page too, and I'm kind of like a mad scientist in the poetry.
Love it.
So, for a while, I will say that I was very frustrated with poetry, and particularly after I graduated from getting an MFA, because I had learned all the technique, but I just felt like my voice wasn't there. It wasn't in it. I could write the villanelles, I could do all those things, but it didn't seem to be me. I didn't feel like there was an authentic voice there. So I took some time off and I just studied music.
Really?
Music. Yeah, I studied like some classical music. People who know me well. That I love D'Angelo. So I studied a lot of his stuff. I watched a lot of musicians' interviews. And I just took time because I think music and poetry are often kindred spirits. So I did that. I just studied other things, cooking, gardening. I was just teaching myself other things because I wanted to try to reset my mind. I just wanted to reset my mind as a poet. And so I had to kind of unlearn some things in order to tap into the creativity and to the voice that was there, but I couldn't get to it because I was so focused on getting the line right and doing all of these other things. So I had to make a choice what kind of poet I was going to be. And so I'm okay with not winning awards. I'm okay with not being on the cover of the magazine, but I'm not okay with not trying to be as creative as possible.
In the end, when you look back or you share it with someone, this is what you share. You share these poems, you pass on or look back at these poems. A trophy's cool, but after a little while, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
In here. Yeah. And something you can be proud of is something that's going to read well on the page. And then when you finished it, you're like, yes, this is it. This is the piece. Yeah. And I love that you said that you like to become more creative, or if you hit a creative slump, you just go and learn something else, something different. I do that exact same thing. And I love that you said that because you're the first person that has ever said that as part of kind of their creative process, in that, you get stumped and you're just like, I'm going to figure out how to keep that rose bush alive now. And it does it getting your mind completely off of whatever you're trying to create and just go do something else. And you're creating something with that too. Usually, you're learning a different skill. Or, the rose bush is not dead. That is a current problem in my yard. And then when that is sort of, you've learned that and you've sort of expanded your mind a little bit with that, when you come back to be creative, whatever that creativity is, if you're, like you said, if you're painting or there's poetry or you're writing or you're creating, trying to write that screenplay or whatever, you get to come back to it with sort of these fresh eyes, and maybe this new skill factors in. Maybe your new poem's about a rose bush, and maybe it's not at all, but it doesn't matter. It's just freed you up a little bit.
And back to what I said earlier about the doing of language, and Toni Morrison talking about we do language, back to motherhood. My daughter didn't learn words through sitting at a table and reading. She learned by doing, by finger play, by, rhyme and music and all. And so that's how we get to language. She arrived at language, or is getting to language by the doing, not necessarily by the study. I think the study helps you perfect language, but you have to be able to do it. And so that's just a writing philosophy that I have. So, I don't know if it makes sense, but it makes sense to me.
As long as it makes sense to you. But no, it does. It does make sense. And you go to school, you take courses, you do things to, like you said, perfect your writing or your craft, whatever that is. But it isn't what puts the heart into it. you have to figure out where that comes from on your own, whatever it is you're doing in life.
And I want to say something just to artists, to people, whatever it is that you want to do in the world. Like if I don't say anything else tonight, like
Yes.
that I really want people to get is that the more authentic you are in your work, the universe will open up to you in that way. And you will receive more when you are authentic. And so don't think that, don't judge yourself on what other people's successes are. Don't measure yourself by all the things you see on social media. Don't think that you're behind or whatever the case. We all have these kind of imposter syndromes or insecurities as artists or as business people. But the more that you are almost at peace with who you are, the more opportunities will come to you. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but it's been my experience that when I got clear about what I was going to do, what kind of poet I was going to be, everything just started opening up for me. But when I was trying to figure out a brand or whatever, all the stuff that people say you have to do, it just wasn't working. I was fighting against the current. And so I just, I want to encourage people to find their own path and be true to that.
I think of if you see somebody, who do you want to go sit in next to and hang out with? The person that just is really comfortable and kind of open with their speech and just makes that space feel warm and inviting, or the person who's like, oh, I have this here and I have this there and this thing and that's good, and look at my outfit and it's in school. Oh yeah, hi, I see you. Okay, and that person, you might talk to them for a little bit, you're not going to hang out. You don't want to. It doesn't just feel inviting. They feel sidetracked by all these 5 other things they've got to get right in order to get to the part that they say they're doing. Yeah. And that what you're describing with being your authentic self, and those people that do have that warm, just inviting feeling, and they're comfortable in their space, they do invite not only actual people I'm saying, but the universe says, oh, I see that, things just come at you. They're not afraid. They don't bounce off whatever the bubble is that you're creating around yourself. You just break that down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have another question for you from MG Long. If you were on a desert island for a year and could take only one poet's collected works with you, who would it be? No pressure. It's cool.
Oh. I can only take one?
I mean, they say one, but if you can narrow it down, we'll fudge it.
Oh. It would probably be Lucille Clifton.
All right. Any particular, is there more than... Is it just the collected works of, or
there's been a new collection of her work that's been published, which has, I would cheat. I would just get the compilation of all her stuff,
right,
and take it with me. But Lucille Clifton and God, that's a hard one. That's a good question though. But Lucille Clifton comes to my mind first.
That works. I'm gonna see if I can find her collected work. See if it's available. I'm sure it is.
Yeah, and there's an introduction to. Yeah.
We'll see if we can find it. Well, I'll tell you. So I have a kind of a question that may be similar. Who was the first poet that made you? Really turned you on to poetry as opposed to just writing? Your first love of poetry, I guess.
Oh, gosh. There's so many. I would argue that oftentimes Black preachers are poets.
Absolutely.
So they're kind of like spoken word artists to me. So I think going back to kind of being rooted and growing up in a church, a Black church, with all the language and vernacular and all the things that you find in a Black church. Those were some of my early spoken word artists. But I absolutely love Sonia Sanchez for her musical. I just love her. I love her. Just I just love her, but for so many reasons, because I feel like she never lets a word drop. And I still want to be that, like the way she turns words on themselves and makes them new and makes words that you wouldn't even think went together. She puts them together and just creates this harmony of language. But she also does these musical performance aspects inside of her poetry. But she's also wise. She's revolutionary. So she would be, I think I have her right behind me. And anytime that I am on a Zoom or something, I'm oftentimes trying to put poets behind me that I want to have my back. And so she's definitely behind me. Homegirls and Hand Grenades, Gwendolyn Brooks. And then I have all my stuff from graduate school, all the classics, Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, like, just the gambit of poets. And then I also, on my bookshelf, just to talk about bookshelves for a second.
Do it, yeah.
I know, like, people have their thing, but like I'm not a showy person, but I do take pride in my bookshelf in my house. Yeah. So, my bookshelf, I have a section on my bookshelf. I had this bookshelf actually made because I have so many books, but I have a section on my bookshelf that is local. So I have like New Orleans folks, Louisiana folks, and I can pull them when I want to. I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. I have a Cleveland, section, and then I just have other thematic things on my bookshelf, so that when I'm teaching or when I need to refer to something, I can pull, quickly. I even have a whole collection, a study of Psalms, looking at Psalms as poems, and so I'm all over the place. Yes. But I think they're all useful to me as a writer.
Absolutely.
I hope that answered the question.
I think so. I did it. I'll tell you too, growing up, from kindergarten to 7th grade, I went to religious school, and there were 50 kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. Like, that was it. The school was very small. And we would do those same things you're talking about, where we would do the everyone does the part of the performance. Because if there's only 50 kids, everyone can be, has to be in the performance. There's no sitting it out. And it was a father-son preacher team. And when the dad was up, we were like, oh no. But when the son went, because he did that, he was much more, he was talking to us. The dad was talking more old school, Pastor Toll was old school, but Brother Toll, his son, was like, okay, let me talk to you. And he would be much more lyrical and much more like, we would be very excited when he was going to talk to us today. And
so like, I'm always ear hustling language, right?
Absolutely.
So whether it's the porch talk of New Orleans folk, whether it's playing cards across the table, that language that happens, whether it's my daughter talking to her friends and some of the stuff that they twist language, or like, she's always asking me, what does that word mean? If you use a word, like, she's really good with asking, what does that word mean? And oftentimes I'm on the spot for giving her a definition, and it keeps me on my toes because I'm having to explain or give an example of this word and how it works in the world. So I'm always ear hustling language, as I love music. So that's a big thing. I'm always looking for listening in hip hop. I really feel like hip hop artists. I was just talking about this on a podcast with Christina Jones. It's called 360 Cypher. And we're talking about how we think MCs are some of the best language folks, especially if you're battling as a hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have a vocabulary. You got to read
Yes.
something. And so, well, maybe not now in current hip hop, but that could be, that could be debated. But, back in the day, if you were going to battle in a lunchroom or on the corner, you had to have vocabulary words at your dispense, anytime off the top of your head. And so being able to ear hustle language in all the forms and all the ways that it occupies the world is something that I love to do. I love to hear old people talk.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in the book, of course. I'm always kind of telling these old women's stories in the book. But those things are important to me, and they are hands-on workshops for me as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Then I do the technical stuff too. Most people know who my husband is. So, being married to a journalist,
Right.
other, so that this is like my poetry bookshelf, but he's got a shelf where, editing, grammar,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So we're like, I'm more the creative writer. He's the more technical writer. But we meet in the middle. But all of those things are important. So we are a family of words and language, and so it's fun. It's fun.
My husband is he was in TV news for a long time, and now he works for a company that makes editing software, but they still go to news stations. So he has that journalist background, like he's just been in newsrooms for so long. And so sometimes when we're trying to communicate, he's giving me like point 1, 2, 3, 4, fact. And I'm like, I'm even having a hard time following you because there's nothing like, I see it a little bit more, I don't know, colorful might be the word, and so even within our communications and our relationship, we've had to figure out how to find that like middle of communicating for sure.
Sure. And he's more like I said, the technical writer, and I am kind of like, I do what I feel, do what you wanna, interesting conversations in our home.
Yeah, and my son also, like, he'll use words, and he doesn't so much anymore. So I don't know how old your daughter is, but my son's 14, so he doesn't ask me for anything right now. But a few years ago, he would ask, what does this mean? And it also makes you think, because he'll ask me a word and I go, oh, well, I definitely know what that is. And I start talking, and like halfway through, I'm like, you know what? Maybe we should look that up, because like I'm going to tell you something and then I'm not even sure. That's kind of the way it works in the world, or the way it feels. But if you really want to know, maybe we should Google that, because like it makes you think too, things you think you know. And all of a sudden you're like, maybe like there's other ways to use this, or other ways.
And to your point about thinking, I often, it seems like other genres are praised for thinking, whereas I think sometimes people think poets just slap something on the page. But there is a real thought process that happens for many poets. And for myself, I can only speak for myself, and that I'm always thinking about the next poem. And in this particular book, I took a lot of time to think about the poems, the order, the structure. The book begins with the question poem. The book ends with the question poem. There's the sections. There's the book cover. There's all of these things that I'm thinking about. And so oftentimes I think that poets are kind of slapped into this category of just feelers, not thinkers. And so I hope that people can put some respect on poets' names as well, beyond Poetry Month.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
All year. So I'll ask you in your book, I'm going to ask you to pick your favorite, but if you can't pick your favorite poem, which one's your favorite one to read or perform? If you had to read one for us, what would it be?
Oh gosh.
Because sometimes that's a little bit easier. Then it's not like you're picking a favorite poem technically.
My favorites really depend on the day, I often feel close to my grandparents when I read the poem about migration. and just their travel in the world. And I should say, in this pandemic, I found out that my great grandmother wanted to be a poet and studied poetry, and she was the entertainment in her living room, and she would get up and recite poems, and just had a love for poetry. And so I'm meeting family members that I've never met before, and one in particular is like, you're the it came like 3 generations later, but you're what she wanted to do. And that really just shifted everything for me. But apparently she was just this poet that could recite poems off the top of her head, and was just this amazing orator, lover of poetry, tried to teach herself French, all sorts of things. And so this is my grandfather's mother. So in this book, in midway, I'm finding this out with this. So it totally has shifted my love for the poems in this book, but also it feels so much more sacred. And so depending on what day I feel certain things. I have a poem for a friend that passed away, my first friend, died under 40. And I have a poem in there for her. There are days that Super Sundays, when I'm like loving New Orleans, I I love that poem, you know. So there are all kinds. And when I just feel like the world is on fire, I go to the first poem or the last poem in the book. And so it really just depends. Well, ask me what poem am I going to read today?
Yeah, what poem would you read today if you were asked to read a poem? I mean, hypothetically.
Yeah.
The other day I was reading your poetry out loud in the morning at the kitchen table, because I was just having my coffee. No one else was there yet. So I'm just sort of reading, and I'm reading it out loud. And my son comes in and he sits down, and I just go to the next poem, and it's Mama Said. And I was like, I sort of read it ahead. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally reading this one out loud. And so I read that one out loud, and I got to the very end, and he looks at me, God, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
I love you.
That is a poem in the tradition of like nursery rhymes. So I'm working on a whole series of those. You mentioned, I think on Twitter, that I have on my website, I have this poem I do with my daughter, which is a whole nursery rhyme kind of hand game poem. So some days I feel like that, although that's not in the book. I think I'm going to do, when I'm thinking about all the Black people that have been killed as of late, in the marches and the protesting, I think I'm going to read Disruptions, because there are many who are not able to be out in the streets, but their hearts are with the people as well. Disruptions. I watch the news in unison, with women rocking babies asleep, folding laundry in piles of days while Ferguson burns his garments. We sing soft uncertainties, work doubles, lift heavy men, use every muscle to smile. A woman talking like everybody's niece holds our demands on cardboard under streetlights, police sirens flash across her Black determination. I wonder if she knows me and us who weep behind duty and closed doors. We who cannot march without the consequence of empty refrigerators, payments, and feverish children, want to die in the fields too, wear the crown of the people, brush truth down our daughters' backs. I want this midnight courage that cracks its voice at darkness, demands answers at the front lines, sends war cries over the hills of night, organizing tomorrow on clipboards. Dear sisters, I wish I were a lion tamer like you, but who will remember my simple revolution to stay home and mother? Thank you.
um, I mean, yes.
I struggled, in particular during the Ferguson time and other things, Tamir Rice, all of those. And my daughter was much younger, and I wanted to be out there, but I couldn't. I didn't. I just had to be a mom, right? And that was my revolution for that moment. That was my way of contributing, was to try to invest in the next generation. And so those are also different. Caring for others is a type of revolution too. And so I just wrote that poem for those who can't always be out in the streets.
Absolutely. The caring and then the teaching, those are opportunities, even if you can't go out there, passing that information and what is happening and not shielding it. You shield it because you're not pushing them out in the street, but you don't shield it like it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with my son, where you have this opportunity to go, okay, this is what's happening, and this is why it's happening. And
there are like different phases. When I was in college, even in high school, I was a big activist. And in college, I was a big activist, almost putting my degree on the line for, the cause, sitting
right.
in the president's office in college and really, giving my all to marching. I was out there, but I think as you progress in life, the ways that you contribute to social justice issues and to movements varies depending on what season you are in your life. And so the poems that I write now about struggle and injustice and racism have perspective now versus when I was 18, like, there, everything was hard. I was looking at some of my old stuff like, oh my gosh, I was really, I was out there, and so I think I'm a little more, I'm not watered down by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have kind of perspective and wisdom and understand that you can lose a lot of, you can have like fatigue. You can have kind of like, movement fatigue, and so understanding how to have that self-care inside of doing the work in community is very important. And so I do that a lot more through poetry now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What time frame do these poems span? Like, what's the earliest one that you wrote and the most recent one?
The earliest one. Might be Names Don't Name Me. I was teaching young people a creative writing class, and that's how that poem came to me. And who have the book or are interested in it, the poem never, it just uses capital N throughout the book, but it's a poem about language and about like the history of the N word and how young people are using it now. And
that is fascinating to me too. That's a whole other language thing. Well, I was going to say it was last year, but it was, I think, year before. It was 6th grade for my son. They read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Yeah, and I wanted them to read the unedited version. Like, I wanted them to read the real version, and they did. And there were, quite a few kids during the time that they were reading this that, like, got calls home, Matt got sent home, and these different things for using the word. And there is, you know, it may or may not have actually even been in a negative way. But so they had this policy, like in the room, it was okay if you were talking about the book, but as soon as you left the room, you couldn't say it for any reason. And I was like, this is a hard concept. Right here, you set up this interesting like language concept. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and who can say it and how you can say it. And there's no, I don't know if there's a right answer exactly, because it is so changing in a way.
I should read that poem. Can I read that poem?
Please.
Talking
Yes.
about it.
Absolutely.
I should read that one.
Please do.
Because I'm also thinking of myself as an audience person, that sometimes people are talking about a great part of the book and then they don't go through it, and I'm like, oh, I thought they were going to, you know, but maybe that's the cliffhanger.
Yeah, do it.
Names don't name me. My sixth graders know good words from bad ones, except when the word starts with N. Sometimes it's hard for them to explain why. It drifts easy without an anchor or thought or history or excuse me or oops or don't or stop saying that N word. It's just there, they say, on purpose sometimes, a habit mostly between friends, you know. The N word don't mean what it meant. Used to be a bad sign in a yard on fire in the South. It's just familiar talk before what's up or please. It's the beat we speak when the radio's on and the jokes fly. It's the punchline emphasized. You've heard a woman cussing mad or a fight starting in the street. Could be an N word acting like an N. Depends on the mouth's meaning and if you're in or outside or strangers. White folks don't want them thinking our talk is theirs. It's different. Can't explain why our English don't mean the way it used to. In slavery, in Mississippi, in Georgia, in Memphis, in Kentucky, in stores, in bathrooms, in schools, in courtrooms, in elections, in hospitals, in restaurants, in banks, in day or night. The N-word don't hang on doors or trees or chase my feet or grandpa no more. That's history, they say. Sixth graders know these things. They learned it all before knowing the right way to rub words together to start a fire.
That is so powerful. And that last little bit, I mean, when I first read that, I was like, that was the magic. That was the magic piece right there, before they knew how to rub two words together to start a fire. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, see, they need a finger snapping, like a little emojicon. But yes, it's beautiful.
See, I'm not looking at like comments, so I can't see anything. So I don't know what people are saying, and I try to just like not. Maybe I just.
If you click the comments tab at the top over there, there we go.
But like, I have to say this about myself. Although I do the audio and video stuff, I don't watch myself. Like, I will probably not watch this when it's like live, when it's like on YouTube or Facebook. I just don't. Like, I try not to look at comment sections. I get that from my husband, right? Yeah. As a columnist, like, you know, the comment sections can be, you know, really scary. And so I just try to push through and just do the work, because things will start getting in my head, and you know, and I'll start really being self-critical. So yeah, the comments now. Yeah.
This is live comments, so these are good because we're interacting with them. But afterward, no, I don't go back. Don't go backwards. Just we're living in this moment. We're good to go.
Hi from Florida. Hello. Let's see if I can shout out some people. MJ Long. I feel like I know MJ Long. Maybe Dwight, you follow me?
Do we know you? How do we know you? Tell us in the comments.
Yeah. So, yeah, the book, you were asking me about the span of the book. The original manuscript for this book was called Shame on Her. And I was looking at how women experience shame. And then it felt so heavy. It just felt so heavy. And it felt like I was giving nobody any hope. And I said, I can't do this. I really, like, I have to do something else, right? Not only for the reader, but for myself. And so I redid some of the manuscript. And Freedom Knows My Name comes from this line from an old hip hop rhyme that I had, as you said, I've done many things. I've been like a slash rapper too. And so it comes from a line in this hip hop thing that I was doing. And so one day it just came back to me, like in the morning, like that's it. And when I say Freedom Knows My Name, I'm talking about the journey and the struggle, both as a collective, as Black people, and also the individual journey, like balancing, I want these things from my community. I want to be free, but I also like want to be free in my own life, right? I want to have freedom to live and to do other things, right? And particularly as a woman, sometimes we sacrifice for the collective. And we put ourselves on the back burner. So this is also about like, hey, freedom knows who I am too, right? They haven't forgotten about me. And I think that the more you are well as an individual, the more you can be a contribution to someone else, to your household, to your community, whatever. So that's what I'm trying to grapple with in this book, and particularly through a Black woman's lens, is how do I journey, and what's my journey, the collective journey of freedom, and like what's my own personal stuff, because we all have stuff too that we need to deal with and get free, right? So, and it's like how life and society shapes all of that, your narrative and what you tell yourself. Yeah. So that's kind of where Freedom Knows My Name. That's how the book gets its title. And this is a long time coming for me. People think I'm surging now, but I often tell people I'm just reclaiming my time. Most people know that my husband was ill for a while with kidney disease. My in-laws lost their entire home in a tornado just in Mississippi. My baby sister had, was diagnosed with severe epilepsy and was just like having seizures, left like constantly in the hospital. All sorts of things happened to me that I had to like write and pause, do something here and then stop and deal with life and, all of those kinds of things. And so I'm kind of like reclaiming my time now, where I have taken care of many things and many people. And this book is really also a gift to myself, as a testament of like sticking to something and like seeing a dream through to the very end. So,
well, congratulations. It does an amazing job. I loved your book. I loved your videos, and please, everyone, go check out Kelly's website and watch the videos on her website, and grab the book. We have it here at Garden District. They are signed, so it's not quite available through our website yet, but you can call us and we will mail it anywhere in the world, and you can stop in
I see. We are the Holy One. Oh, I should talk about. It's your time. Don't stop. Okay. Oh, speaking of home, Debbie Terry is in the comment section, and she was my nursery school teacher. So she would know the real starts of of me being a poet, because she was there really early on. I see somebody talking about We Are the Holy Ones. That was written after the book was done, but that was done as a commissioned poem for the New Orleans Historic Collection. And if you go to their website, you can see the video of me doing this poem where I am talking back to an unnamed poet. They don't know the identity of this poet, but it was through from the 1800s, Afro-Creole poetry. They found all these Afro-Creole poets in newspapers when Black folks couldn't get published. Often in other ways, they would publish in Black newspapers. And so I'm talking back to history in that poem. And so yeah, that is up. That is something else online. I'll plug also The Body Remembers, which is a project with Tulane University, Tulane University's dance and theater. So they asked me to write a poem looking at the pandemic in New Orleans, and they choreographed a dance to this poem, which I like the poem. But I haven't seen the performance yet. So because of the rain and everything, they have rescheduled it for Monday. But you can go and see it in person at the Music Box Village, or you can stream it online. I think it's like $5 to stream it online.
Okay, so I just put both of those things in the comments, so everybody can go watch We Are the Holy Ones at the Historic New Orleans Collection website, and then The Body Remembers. There's tickets at that link. It'll tell you how to watch it. Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's 6:00, so we totally made it. I know. You start out and you're like, how are we going to fill an hour? And then all of a sudden it's 6:00. So.
Yeah, and it flew by. So thank you all. Thank you, Garden Book District. Garden Book District. Garden District Books.
Yeah,
it's a long day.
They're all in there. If you Google the words, it'll come up.
I was saying before we got on that, I attended a funeral morning that really just threw me a little bit. Just a beautiful elder that has passed on. So I want to say also, you all be safe out there and take care of yourselves the best way that you feel you should. And, keep reading poetry, keep supporting poetry, keep supporting local bookstores. It's important. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I hope that you all have enjoyed it and that you will check me out whenever you see me around the city.
Absolutely. Anytime you see Kelly's name in something, definitely check it out. Worth it, for sure. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week.